In 1960, the sky was restless. Unmarked spacecraft glided over Earth's atmosphere in tight formations, their presence silent but deliberate. In a control room buried deep beneath Arlington, Virginia, military officers monitored radar anomalies as a new command came through. MJ Command, the encrypted voice feed of Majestic 12, a clandestine organization known to only a few at the highest levels of government, authorized interception. Their target, a Russian spacecraft that had veered off its planned course. Pursuit orders were issued. From hidden bases, sleek aircraft with unknown serials took to the sky. They weren't chasing blindly. Their systems had been tracking strange electromagnetic pulses emanating from the Russian vehicle. Something wasn't right. Mid-flight, one of the U.S. pilots broke formation. An object had entered his line of sight, much larger than anything previously recorded. The strange craft shimmered as if bending light around it. Before he could react, it unleashed a pulse. His controls seized up, systems overloaded, and the aircraft spiraled. The last thing he saw before losing consciousness was a colossal ship, unmoving, watching. Then darkness. A year later, John Leonard sat at a desk in a quiet corner of Capitol Hill. 24 years old, sharp-tongued and freshly cynical, he believed he understood the world, its politics, its secrets, its angles. He didn't. He narrates this later with clarity. At 24, I thought I knew everything. I didn't even know what I was part of. That morning, John received a new assignment. His superior handed him a manila folder stamped with red. Project Blue Book. Review requested. His job? Investigate unusual military activity and public claims regarding UFOs. He was to visit Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio, home to many sealed files and even more sealed mouths. Upon arriving, he was met by Major Robert, a tall, stoic man with eyes that didn't blink often enough. Robert wasn't happy. "Why are you opening old wounds?" he asked. John shrugged. "My boss wants clarity. That's it. No agenda." Major Robert gave a tight nod but didn't believe him. No one just opened up Project Blue Book, not without strings attached. John's next stop was a small home in rural New Hampshire. Inside lived Betty and Barney Hill, the first civilians to publicly report being abducted by something they couldn't explain. John sat across from them, tape recorder on the table, legal pad on his knee. "It started as just a light in the sky," Betty said. Barney took over. "At first, we thought it was a plane, but the way it moved, cutting sharp angles, hovering, wasn't natural." They described how the object approached their car, how it hovered above them, and how Barney, through binoculars, saw figures in its windows, not human. He grew visibly disturbed recounting it. John recorded everything. Unbeknownst to them, two men sat in a nearby van, headphones on, monitoring every word. The tape wasn't just for the archives, it was evidence, dangerous evidence. Later that night, as John drove through a back road toward his hotel, his radio sputtered. Frequencies shifted on their own, a high-pitched whine filling the cabin. Then flashing lights. He pulled over. A helicopter hovered low behind him. He ran into the trees, heart hammering. But he didn't get far. 3 men tackled him to the ground, Their suits were black, their faces unreadable. "Delete the tape," one of them ordered. John struggled. "Who are you?" They didn't answer, just said, "The hills won't testify." They saw a plane. That's all. Before leaving, one leaned in close. "You'll drop this, or we'll drop you." They vanished into the dark as silently as they came. But John didn't drop it. Instead, he leaned deeper into the files. The deeper he went, the more he saw signs pointing back to Majestic 12, a group no one officially acknowledged but had their hands in every unexplainable event tied to aerospace and UFOs. Determined, John requested an internal visit to a Majestic 12 facility. After layers of screening and cold stares, he was granted entry to a gray building outside Arlington, guarded by men who never smiled. A captain led him inside. No name badge, no rank, just authority. He walked John through an underground hallway, finally stopping at a sealed room. Inside, beneath glass and artificial lighting, lay something unmistakably not human. Slender, pale gray, elongated skull. Its eyes were black, glassy, lifeless. "This was recovered in 1947, the captain said. "Roswell?" John asked. The captain didn't answer. He didn't have to. John took a step back. He wasn't ready to see it. But he knew one thing. He was already in too deep to turn around. 2 weeks later, John's clearance was upgraded. They didn't ask if he wanted to join Majestic 12. They told him he already had. His life was no longer his. Kimberly, his girlfriend, asked questions. He gave her none of the answers. His first mission was in Idaho, where bizarre crop markings had appeared overnight on a private farm. John posed as a representative from the county's extension office, hoping to win the farmer's trust. He didn't. But when John hinted at government compensation for property damage, the farmer showed him the field. As John examined the markings, he noticed a small golden plate embedded in the dirt, etched with a symbol identical to one carved into the field itself. When he turned around, the farmer was gone. A truck engine roared. John barely leaped out of the way as the man tried to run him down. He radioed for backup. Within minutes, Majestic 12 field operatives arrived, chasing the farmer down until his vehicle flipped and exploded into the ditch. They thought he was dead. At the morgue, as medical examiners prepared to begin the autopsy, the man's eyes snapped open. One examiner leaned close, too close. The corpse lunged, tentacles bursting from his throat. One worker screamed as the parasite latched onto his face. John slammed the thing into a jar and sealed it tight. Later, Majestic confirmed. The parasite was the same species as the one found inside the alien body from Roswell. It wasn't just a body snatcher, it was a weapon. John couldn't sleep that night. He stared at the ceiling, realizing everything he thought he knew had collapsed. Earth wasn't just being visited, it was being studied, infiltrated, infected. And the war hadn't even started yet. The air outside the Majestic 12 facility smelled like nothing, sterile, overfiltered. Inside, it was worse. Everything hummed with a low, constant vibration, like the building itself was alive. John walked the halls with a new badge clipped to his belt and a stomach tight with unease. He hadn't agreed to anything, not out loud. But here he was, wearing the uniform, being escorted through layers of classified corridors. The captain who had shown him the alien body 2 weeks ago walked beside him, silent. He led John into a dimly lit lab where a glass case stood in the center. Inside, floating in a bluish liquid, was the creature from the morgue. The same tentacled organism John had pulled from a man who was supposed to be dead. "We've seen it before," the captain said. 15 years ago, inside the Roswell body. But this one survived outside a host. John stared at it, twitching slowly inside the jar. "What is it?" he asked. "We don't know what it calls itself," the captain replied, "but we call it a ganglion. They attach to the brain, root into the spine, control behavior, memory, speech." John didn't say anything. He couldn't. The implications were too big. If these things had been inside people before, how many more were walking around infected? A few days later, John was flown out to Idaho again. A new field had been marked overnight. The same sigils burned into the soil, the same strange energy. This time, he went with full majestic clearance, a team ready on standby. He approached the farmer again, claiming to be with the Department of Agriculture. The man was agitated, twitchy, his eyes darting constantly. John tried to ease him into conversation, asking if he'd seen lights, strange sounds. The man avoided the questions, but agreed to take John back out to the field. This time, the tension was thicker. The farmer said nothing as they walked through the crop rows. John noticed something glinting in the soil, a second golden plate, smaller than the first. He bent down to pick it up. Behind him, the roar of an engine. The farmer, wild-eyed, drove his truck straight at him. John ran. Majestic operatives hidden nearby moved in, chasing the vehicle until it flipped over. The farmer was pulled from the wreckage, not dead, but not right either. At the morgue, just like last time, the body reanimated. The medics froze. Before they could back away, the man vomited a mass of tentacles, latching onto the nearest examiner. Screams echoed down the hall. John slammed the emergency lock and watched in horror as the creature began to separate itself from the host's mouth. A living, writhing parasite clawing its way free. He pried it off the examiner's face and locked it in another containment jar. The worker was left gasping, shaking, but alive. Barely. Later, the captain confirmed it. Same organism, same behavior. But now they knew more. The creatures didn't just kill their hosts, they used them, rewrote their thoughts, their behavior. These weren't random attacks. They were coordinated infections. Back home, John tried to keep it together, but Kimberly wasn't stupid. She knew something was wrong. He was distant, nervous, never answering direct questions. She pressed him harder each time he came home late. One night, as he stood in the kitchen, she confronted him directly. "What are you hiding?" she asked. "Are you cheating on me? Are you in trouble?" He just looked at her and said nothing. "I can't do this," she whispered. "If you can't be honest, I'm moving out." She walked into the bedroom and slammed the door. That night, the flower pots outside crashed to the ground. Kimberly woke with a start. She looked out the window and saw it. A ship hovering silently in the sky above the street, its surface shimmering like hot metal. She locked the doors and backed away. But it was too late. The room filled with light. Shadows moved across the walls. She turned and found herself surrounded. Figures moved in from every side. Not tall, gray aliens, something else. Insectoid, silent. They reached for her, and everything went black. When she opened her eyes, she was in bed. John was standing over her, gently shaking her awake. Her eyelids fluttered. "I'm tired," she murmured. He left for work. The moment the door closed, Kimberly sat up. Her pillow was stained red. She reached for her head, confused. Something was wrong. Something inside her. At Majestic, a new term spread through the ranks: ganglion. Biologists described how they latched onto the prefrontal cortex, altering thoughts, suppressing memories. John attended a meeting where the captain confirmed something chilling. President Kennedy had not been informed about any of it. "He doesn't know Majestic exists," the captain said, "and we're keeping it that way." John's mind spun. The highest office in the country was in the dark, and Majestic was acting without oversight. He said nothing, but inside the ground was beginning to crack. That evening, his former boss, now clearly aligned with Majestic, showed up at John's home. Kimberly answered the door, wary and exhausted. "John is a threat," he said flatly. "What are you talking about?" she asked. He stepped forward, conjuring a sphere of light in his hand. "Touch it," he said. Kimberly backed away. "Go away," she whispered. But the light grew, and something about it called to her. She reached forward and was sucked into it. John came home seconds later. Kimberly lay on the floor, dazed. His former boss stood over her, smirking. "She's mine now," he said. John tackled him. They fought, smashing through furniture, until John shoved him hard enough to knock him out the window. The man hit the pavement below and didn't move. John knelt by Kimberly, panicked. She was breathing, but distant. Something was in her, something alive. He begged Majestic to help. They refused, so he stole a compound from one of their labs, said to push ganglions out of human hosts. He mixed it into a drink and gave it to Kimberly. Then he drove her to an abandoned farmhouse, carrying a syringe of acetone, one of the few known chemicals that hurt the creatures without killing the host. As he prepared the injection, Kimberly looked at him with glassy, terrified eyes. "I don't want this," she said. He hesitated. Then she lunged. They struggled across the floor. She bit his arm, scratched his face. Her body jerked in unnatural ways. But John held her down long enough to drive the needle into her arm. Her body went limp. For minutes, nothing happened. Then she coughed, choked, and vomited the creature out of her throat, slimy, writhing, gasping for air. John slammed it into a jar and sealed the lid. Kimberly lay in his arms, unconscious but breathing. He didn't sleep. The next day, she woke up groggy, confused, scared. John tried to explain. She barely listened. But over the next few days, her strength returned. She slowly began to remember what had happened. They knew what they had to do. Expose Majestic 12, expose the Hive, and warn the president before it was too late. The plan was simple, dangerous but simple. They would sneak into the captain's home and take the one thing he never removed, his necklace. It wasn't just jewelry. John had seen him use it as a key, a badge, a tracker. If there was a way to crack into the deeper layers of Majestic 12, it was through that necklace. Kimberly played the distraction. She knocked on the captain's door while his wife answered. John slipped through the back, broke into the office, and found it hanging on a hook above the desk. He didn't stop to look around. He just grabbed it and left. They used the necklace to gain access to a secure file room, breaking into a safe system that cataloged years of alien encounters, internal correspondence, and medical logs tied to infected individuals. Among the files were diagrams of the ganglions, mission orders that contradicted the public Blue Book reports, and photos of bodies, human and otherwise, dissected and cataloged. They documented everything. Kimberly delivered the information to the White House while John covered her tracks. They thought they'd have to push to get a response, but they didn't. Within days, John received an invitation from Robert Kennedy. The meeting was quiet, off the record. A private room, no aides, no notes. Robert closed the door behind him and looked John in the eye. "We've seen your evidence. We believe you." John exhaled, but then Robert added, "We need you to stay inside Majestic. Keep feeding us intel. If this is as deep as it looks, we need a man on the inside." John hesitated. After everything they'd done, what they'd done to Kimberly, it felt like betrayal. But he agreed. Across town, in a dark room, the captain watched John through a surveillance screen. He already knew John had leaked the files, and he wasn't going to let it slide. When John and Kimberly returned home, their apartment was wrecked. Drawers ripped open, photos shredded, the floor covered in broken glass. They froze in the doorway, then saw agents approaching from the stairwell. John grabbed Kimberly's hand and pulled her into the bathroom. They climbed out through the window, ducked into the alley, and made it to the car. The agents followed. John drove straight through a stoplight and didn't look back. They hid out at a motel under a false name. Kimberly sat on the edge of the bed watching the news. President Kennedy assassinated in Dallas. Neither of them spoke. Now it was real. They were officially fugitives, traitors in the eyes of Majestic 12, alone. But they weren't finished. John reached out to Jesse Marcel, a former intelligence officer connected to the Roswell crash. He was the only one left who had seen what happened and lived to talk about it. Jesse agreed to meet. His apartment was lined with books, military plaques, and a wall safe that looked like it hadn't been opened in decades. John told him everything. The creatures, the infection, the assassination. "I gave the evidence to the president," he said. Jesse was quiet. Then he opened the safe and handed John a small metal case. "It's all here," he said. "Photos, debris, the plate. You need to leave. Now." John tried to press him. "What happened back then?" Jesse paused. "They made contact. They didn't attack. Not at first. But the army opened fire. We killed their envoys." John stood up, pacing. "You're saying this is retaliation?" "I'm saying it never had to get this far." Kimberly burst into the room. "We've been followed." John grabbed the case. Jesse stayed behind. He wouldn't run. Majestic 12 broke into the apartment less than 5 minutes later. They took Jesse. The captain interrogated him hard. Threats, manipulation, pressure. Jesse gave them nothing. Meanwhile, Kimberly followed a new lead. She'd started sensing something strange around some of the Majestic agents, subtle signs that the parasites weren't just infecting civilians. They were inside Majestic itself. She told John that she'd overheard 2 agents talking about a planned hit. A name kept coming up: Oswald. John pieced it together in horror. Oswald wasn't the lone gunman. He wasn't the mastermind. He was a target. He told the captain, who seemed surprised but not skeptical. John watched him lock one of the agents in an isolated room. Minutes later, a parasite forced its way out of the man's body, desperate and exposed. But there was still one problem. There had been 3 shooters. John demanded answers. Who was the third? The infected man, now sedated, only gave him a whisper. "This is just the beginning." Then Majestic arrested John. They didn't call it that. They said it was containment, for security. Inside a sterile holding cell, the captain visited him. For once, he was almost calm. Tired. "You want to know the truth?" he said. "You want my version?" John said nothing. "The aliens came here with an offer," the captain continued. "They displayed a sheet of metal, thin like foil, but it projected entire systems, data, star charts. They asked for peace, for an agreement. What did we do?" John asked. "We told the president they were bluffing, that surrender wasn't an option. So he ordered the attack." John leaned forward. "And now they're inside us." The captain didn't answer. He just stood and left. It was January 1964 when things got worse. Kimberly started seeing visions, nightmares of an astronaut drifting in space. His face kept appearing, behind her eyes, in mirrors, in her dreams. One night, as John drove her through a quiet neighborhood, she drew a symbol on a napkin, the same pattern they'd seen in the crop fields. "Where did you see this?" John asked. She shook her head. "I don't know, it's just in my head." She started sketching more, schematics, fragments of memories. She wasn't just recovering, she was remembering. "I have to find him," she said. "The astronaut. He's calling me." John didn't like it. He warned her it could be another trap, maybe even planted by the hive. But she was certain. The feeling was too real. They found him in a bar on the edge of Nevada. He saw Kimberly and froze, as if he'd known her in another life. They talked. He told her about a space mission gone wrong, how the ship had been hit by lights, how 2 hours had vanished from their timeline. When they came to, they were on the other side of the planet. Instruments destroyed. Memories blank. Kimberly's voice trembled. "I was there. I saw you." They visited a hypnotist to dig deeper. Under hypnosis, Kimberly relived the night she was taken. She saw herself cocooned, trapped in a strange chamber. Alien figures moved around her. The astronaut was next to her, bound the same way. "They rejected him," she whispered. "He wasn't right for them." Her voice cracked. "They chose me instead." She saw the moment the ganglion was implanted, felt it, screamed. When she woke, John held her in his arms. Later, she remembered something else. There were 2 astronauts. The other one, they took him too, but they didn't reject him. She and John knew what that meant. There was another, infected, alive, and still out there. The hotel room was hot, the kind of heat that sticks under your skin. Kimberly sat on the edge of the bed, her back to John, fingers trembling as she rubbed the mark on her wrist, where the device had been, where the parasite had once pulsed inside her. The nightmares weren't stopping. If anything, They were getting stronger, louder. She could still hear them. John watched her from the doorway, silent. He didn't know how to help her anymore. The hive wasn't done with her, and maybe it never would be. Las Vegas buzzed outside their window, loud and oblivious, like nothing was wrong. Neon lights blinked, tourists laughed, music thumped through the walls. No one knew the world was on the edge of unraveling. Kimberly did. She started hearing buzzing whenever she passed a certain table in the casino where she'd found work. Something was off. A frequency that only she could feel. Her boss noticed her unease and offered her and John a room while their car was in the shop. At night, she whispered, "It's still inside me." John pulled her close. "Number U beat it." She looked at him, hollow-eyed. What if it's not just one? What if they come back? But they didn't get to finish that thought. They were taken, snatched from their room by men in suits, blindfolded and separated. When Kimberly's blindfold was removed, she stood in a gilded office, face to face with Howard Hughes. His voice was scratchy, dry. "I know about Majestic, and I know about the Hive." John was brought in moments later, disoriented, bruised, furious. Hughes leaned forward. "I need someone inside, someone the Hive trusts, someone like her." John objected immediately, but Hughes shut him down. "They don't just invade bodies," he said. "They link minds, thoughts, emotions. They're building something underground, something they want to keep hidden." Kimberly agreed. She would pretend to be part of the Hive, one of them, and she was good at it. Too good. Her time under their control had left a residue, something they recognized. They trusted her. In a back room of the casino, a waitress whispered to John about a place called Dreamland. She said it like it was a secret, a myth, but John knew the name. Area 51. That's where they were digging. He asked Hughes about it, but Hughes only nodded. A tunnel, a chamber, deep under the earth. You don't want to know what's down there. John didn't care what Hughes wanted. He needed Kimberly out. But when he tried to reach her, he was dragged back to his room, tied, left to stew. The waitress returned hours later, unlocking his cuffs and whispering, "They're moving her." Now, John and the waitress raced across the desert, chasing the transport vehicle. Kimberly was inside, bound, and across from her sat a man with glassy eyes and a voice that dripped venom, a rogue Majestic 12 agent, infected. He opened a case of creatures, setting them on her skin one by one, watching them writhe. Kimberly gritted her teeth and didn't scream. Not yet. John and the waitress reached the facility just as the truck approached a concrete wall. Gunfire erupted. Hughes' men were in a standoff with Majestic agents. John didn't wait. He drove the truck straight into the wall and passed through it, like it wasn't there. The Hive had cloaked the entrance. John broke their illusion. Inside, chaos. Kimberly was still tied up. The infected agent moved toward her with another parasite in hand. John tackled him and they fought brutally in the dark. Blood, screams, overturned tables. The agent reached for his weapon and Kimberly, desperate, grabbed the jar of creatures they had captured weeks ago. She shattered it on him. They swarmed his face. John pulled Kimberly out, carrying her through the tunnel as the hive screamed behind them. They didn't look back. Outside, police cars pulled up, called by the waitress. Shots fired, bodies fell. Hughes was handcuffed, not for the hive, but for everything else he'd done in the shadows. It didn't matter. John and Kimberly were free. For now, they got their car back, packed the case of documents, the samples, the evidence. The desert stretched out before them, infinite and strange. Kimberly looked out the window, silent. Then she said, "What if they've already won? What if they don't need spaceships anymore? What if we're the last ones left fighting?" John gripped the wheel. "Then we fight until we're not." The radio crackled. A Beatles song came on. Kimberly reached for the dial, but John stopped her. They both listened. Beneath the music, barely audible, was a frequency, a whisper, not in English, not human. They exchanged a look. Somewhere the hive was still speaking, still calling, and they weren't finished yet. The engine roared. The car disappeared into the dark. The war was just beginning.